So it's not just those who don't know what they're doing, it's those that have gone through the process and got it so wrong and paid way more than we actually had, to the point where, and lived in debt for a long time.
I love interviewing people for jobs, and so I'm really trying to find a value fit.
We just say, oh, that great interior designer and that great architect, thinking that it would be a match made in heaven for them. But the reality is that they may have two different personalities that are going to clash.
I started seeing a therapist about 3.5 years ago.
As a proud man, it's like, oh, do I need to? And, you know, but it's been the most wonderful thing, and I couldn't be a bigger advocate.
Welcome to the next episode of Navigating with me, Bertie Russell. We're very excited to have Tom Adams as our guest today. He is the CEO of RedBook Agency, and welcome.
Thank you, Bertie. Great to be here.
Thanks for coming.
Indeed.
We've got to know each other pretty well in quite a short period of time, and I'm super grateful for that. It's been great to get to know you.
No, likewise.
RedBook's an amazing company, but it's also a company that I don't think exists anywhere else, or at least I don't know if it exists in the UK. And so I'd love to hear from you what problem you're solving and how it all came about.
Sure. Firstly, thanks for having me. So I joined RedBook 4 years ago, and it was set up by Sandy Mitchell, our founder, maybe 15 years ago. And he set it up based on his own problem. He bought a grade 2 listed property. That was a wreck, an old farmhouse down in Wiltshire, and wanted to do a significant project. And he was getting loads of different advice from loads of different people, and no one could tell him what he needed in terms of professionals, how they charge, who was right for him and the project and the listing. And he got totally overwhelmed by the whole project undertaking. And he then thought there's got to be a better way to solve this issue and streamline it and make it more comfortable for clients as to how to approach a project. So he set up RedBook, which started off just advising around architects and interior designers, how they charge their different skill sets against listed buildings, country versus London, and being able to introduce the most appropriate professional, architect, interior designer, to the most appropriate clients. And so it was kind of the middleman between these two entities. And that was how I was born. And since then, 15 years later, has kind of transformed into a very different business, but with the same proviso of being able to help clients. We're very much a client service-led business.
Amazing. I think I've done 6 or 7 projects myself now. And it is, even having been in property for nearly 20 years, it is so confusing. And when you're at work and you've got kids and you're frantic, and my wife comes to me thinking that I might have some of these answers because I should know what I'm doing because I'm in property. But it's so confusing. And the latest one we did was a grade 2 listed 15th century thatched cottage. I mean, I've never done anything in the country.
It's a whole new thing.
It's completely different. Yeah. And yeah, you do feel like you're being taken for a ride, and you feel like a bit of an idiot because you don't really know what you're doing.
A really interesting stat that we kind of covered our clients and to work out had they done a project before, and 75% of our clients had done a project before.
Really?
So it's not just those who don't know what they're doing, it's those that have gone through the process, realised how painful it is, how difficult it is, how time consuming it is, and actually how many times they got it wrong. Everyone hears of budgets going out of control, timelines out of control. And so come to us and be like, I've lived it, I've breathed it, please make sure it's not like that again. And so again, that's a kind of demonstration of the kind of client profile. They understand the pain, and if we can remove that and ensure they get it right the first time round, then we've done a good job.
It's funny when you so I've come into our business. My dad set up our business. I've come into it. I may have done something else if that wasn't there, and so I'm trying to put myself in our clients' shoes so I can think like them to then solve the problems from their perspective rather than us putting our stuff on them. But if you are the problem, he was the problem. Like,
sure.
He's the client.
Yeah.
Then you completely have that.
Totally. Do you ever cover your clients as to work out where they're coming from in terms of their issues or what their concerns are, as a kind of way of understanding how you can position or pivot the business to answer or be, improve your service.
We again, like what you said, I think listening is a key thing. So we try and listen to each person.
Yeah.
We're very keen on offering the best service we can and making it bespoke for each person. I suppose with our name above the door and having done it a long time, we really, really care about people finishing the relationship with us and feeling like we're not going to get it right all the time, but
Sure.
we've cared and we've listened and we've tried our best.
Which is quite a feat for the size of the business that you've kind of grown it to, and still maintain the level of service that the brand is kind of known for. That's got to be quite a feat of continued development, or of the wider team, new people joining. Kind of how do you maintain those standards?
Well, I hope we are.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
It's the hiring process is I love interviewing people for jobs, and
I hate it. So I'm glad you like it.
Well, our interviewing process might be different. Ours are kind of like this. That's kind of why we started this, because I quite like just chatting, and really for me it's getting to know someone. It's not, you sort of on the CV you can kind of figure out how many years they've been doing something and how their sort of skill set that they might have. And I think skill sets you can learn, knowledge you can learn, but the kind of attitudes and the values are something that you can develop. But if your values are so unaligned to the values that we hold dear to us,
mm-hmm.
then it's going to be difficult.
Sure.
And so I'm really trying to find a value fit to, are you going to see stuff in the way that we see it? Are you really going to care about the client? Are you going to put them first?
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to do that in your first year, because you're trying to, someone new coming in, and I remember coming in myself many years ago, you're trying to make an impact, you're trying to prove people that you're good at what you're doing. And in our job, it's very easy to take a shortcut. And particularly when you haven't got a deal under your belt, or you're still trying to prove yourself. You're sort of chasing, and you can come across it's tough. And I have huge respect for everyone who works with us, and we have the most amazing team at the moment. And I think the more people we have there have been there for a bit longer and have that value set, and the culture's really set in, and they can see you can be successful
mm-hmm.
by having those nice qualities. You can go to bed at the end of the night and think you've done a nice job. The more that rubs off on people. But we're figuring that out.
Yeah. Always. It's one of our prerequisites to joining RedBook is to have done a project yourself.
Really?
Yeah. And that's something Sandy installed in the business. I think it's a great thing. That's kind of continued there afterwards. Again, understanding that pain, and then being able to then sympathise with the client and make the client feel that you understand those pains and where you're coming from.
So if anyone's listening now that wants to join you,
they
need to get on.
They
need to get onto that pronto.
Exactly. Start painting.
Tell me about yours then. Your project.
My projects. So I've done two.
Was it painful?
It was really painful. I did my first project with my younger brother in Tooting, my first house, and it was a total wreck, and no idea what we were doing, and got it so wrong, and paid way more than we actually had, to the point where we then had to borrow money and lived in debt for a long time, because just approached it all totally differently. We trusted everything with the contractor, which then didn't actually have any sort of consideration around the design, and it was a very we had to then start from scratch again, because the contractor built it in a way, or designed it in a way from their perspective that was, I don't know if it was easier to build, but it had really bad ergonomics in terms of the flow of the house. Yeah. So we kind of got halfway down, realised that actually this just was not going to work. And, again, it was the kind of naivety, I suppose, of knowing when to pull the contract up and say, no, this isn't going to work. But, back then, looking at a set of floor plans, and it just didn't make sense.
And do you think part of that went wrong was, could that the sort of blame could be put on you from naivety rather than them? Because I've done this before, where we've had a floor plan and planning permission's gone through, and I'm like really chuffed that I've got that far.
Yeah.
And then you give it to the builder, and I've done it many times where I've just thought, well, you know what I'm thinking about design, so just
Sure.
build it as you think you should do it, and I'm sure we'll be on the same playing field.
Yep.
And you never are.
Totally.
What are the big problems that people run into that you are solving? Like the particular. I suppose the whole team together is a big thing.
So as I say, we started out just introducing architects and interior designers. Maybe we should just kind of caveats. We don't just. So we have a curated roster of talent, which is like 200 best-in-class firms. But everyone's been vetted, heavily vetted, as to who we represent. It's not just, who do you need? And we'll match you with someone we found online. So we really get kind of comfortable around them as a business, the individuals within that business. And then our advisory board, who Sandy, again, set up 15 years ago to help us give the external seal of approval as to these firms are reputable, known, and at the top of their game. So we have this great pool of talent.
And those people are, they're serious.
They're serious, yeah.
Serious people, aren't they?
Yeah, we like to believe that they are
top of their games.
top, operating all over the world on the most prestigious houses, not always necessarily the biggest, but where design is at the forefront of it.
You're sort of matchmaking all of the right people. You're really listening to what someone wants.
Yeah.
And then you're saying, okay, you need a QS, and you need a interior designer, you need an architect, you need a builder, you need all of these different people, and making sure they meld together.
Exactly. It's not just as molding with the client, it's in terms of personality as much as design alignment, but also with each other as architects with PM, and then there's plenty of,
because that goes wrong sometimes, doesn't it?
There's plenty of personalities within our world who might not align, and so being able to know that, and again, a client approaching it cold would just say, that great interior designer and that great architect, thinking that it would be a match made in heaven for them. But the reality is that they may have two different personalities that are going to clash, and actually it just causes the worst nightmare, because you've got two people attacking each other, and the client's just turned into the middle, and it's just like, I'm now turning into a therapist with my interior designer and architect, and we see it time and time again.
I've had that. I've had two, and on a much smaller scale than what you're dealing with, but I've had people who were unwilling to be on site with the other person.
Sure.
That's just, I could not believe that was a possibility.
The amount of projects that we salvage that have gone wrong, because usually it's the wrong team for the client, for the professionals themselves, but also for the property. The amount of times that someone will get an architect that they love aesthetically, but doesn't have any sort of real experience in London or on heritage buildings, and it's just that level of understanding of what the property needs itself and the project is so totally not on many clients' radar. It's just like that they're a great architect, of course they can do anything. So in reality, it's like, no, everyone has a specialism.
So when would you like to get in there? I presume you'd like to not just salvage projects, but
for sure.
Thankfully,
we don't just salvage projects. I think where we can really add our most value is when a client is looking to buy a property, and we do a lot of kind of pre-purchase advice, and we go around on a bit of a tour similar to yourselves, looking at different properties alongside the agent. The first thing the client says, what can I do to this, from a planning perspective, from a heritage perspective, how much is it going to really cost me, not just what a contract is going to tell me, which is one slice of the pie, and how long is it going to take me. And so we have this very holistic overview that we're not conflicted ourselves, because we're not selling our own product. We're saying, well, this is the market, this is the true cost, and it's not just the construction costs. It's professional fees. Have you considered VAT? Landscape always sits outside of that. In the contractors, you've got material costs, and you've got contractor agent fees, and exactly.
So complicated.
You get so many kind of numbers that sometimes just totally don't get tabled at the early stage.
Yeah.
And so we help take that client through when they're looking at the properties, when they're narrowing it down, giving them confidence, and advising the agent as well in terms of like making sure that they feel well equipped to advise.
Well, you've offered us that service, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been great to work with you and your team on a few great properties, providing that. And yeah, it's just good advice, so that when they buy the property and they do the project, and it doesn't cost them 4 times as much, take 3 times as long, and they can't do what they wanted, and actually they bought something that wasn't right for them. So I think, like everybody, I suppose you want to come up, as far upstream as you possibly can. But in terms of our genuine advice, that is where I think we can really help clients make sure that they are making the best decision for them.
And the cost of works is something that's massively impacted the property market in general the last 3 years. What how have you seen that impacted, and how can you help people from that perspective?
I mean, it's been the biggest thing. If you go, especially after COVID or during COVID, material costs, just the whole costs of doing a project skyrocketed, almost kind of 30-40% in some cases, and put off a lot of people, and everyone kind of then started leaning towards turnkey properties just because it was the unknown, and also obviously the cost increase. Same issues were always coming to us with clients saying, I'm just not ready to do a project because I don't know what the costs really are going to be. So I wanted to create an index which basically covered all of our 200 firms, from, as I said, architects, interior designers, contractors, garden designers, and all of their live projects, equating to thousands of live projects worth of data on build costs, whether it's London, country, right down to Camden versus Westminster, all who have different drivers and pressures which have an impact on cost. And I've been crunching data for the last 2 years on that to be able to provide the industry with a benchmark. And again, we're not selling ourselves as, oh, this is how much we can do a project for. It's like, this is what you should be aware of projects in this area would cost you. And offering it in different tiers, a bronze specification, a silver, a gold, a platinum. What does that look like? Okay, what is the material difference? What is the appliance difference, the kitchen difference? And so bringing it to life for a client, then them saying, well, actually my budget and where I feel comfortable is here. And then you go, okay, great. I know the designers who can meet that budget.
So that makes it then easier for you to help.
Definitely. So it doesn't then skyrocket because they've chosen an interior designer probably who only operates at the top end, and actually it doesn't align with the client's budget.
And
so
what are those costs? So does it escalate through the cost of an appliance, or does it? I mean, how can you determine how expensive things get? Is it some people are more expensive, some processes take more time, and therefore it's more expensive? Is it a combination of everything?
Really is. I mean, material cost is a significant part of it. So specifying what materials you want to use is
sort of marbles and woods.
Is the marbles and woods and stones, and you can be really clever with a budget, and that's the thing. A lower spec doesn't need to look aesthetically,
less beautiful
by any means.
Yeah.
But you do need to be engaged and clever with the process, and it does mean a bit more time from the client in terms of being able to think clever as to how to make the budget work for them. But I would say labour is pretty consistent naturally throughout. There are obviously different skill sets, and one thing I'd always say is go with some reputable firm. Our world, sadly, like most industries, does have those that don't have the same standards, and you think you're saving some money there, but actually cutting those corners in terms of an exit value or just the durability of the property suddenly soon becomes very tired, and you can see that. So I'd definitely say invest in a reputable firm, and from a kind of delivery and labour perspective, skill set. But materials are the biggest kind of differentiator between a bronze specification to a platinum specification.
That's a crazy amount of work you've done to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a huge amount of work, and we're actually launching it this autumn, which is very exciting. As I said,
and what does that look like? What is the launch? What is it? Are people going to be able to? Yeah,
so it becomes very tangible, and it'll be a report and an index that people once a year it's released, where we can talk about what is going on in the industry today with live projects, where it compares to last year, what our predictions are for the year ahead, and it covers build costs, but also deep planning considerations around how many basements we've got consented in Westminster, and what the just crunching data to make it very easy for clients to understand their decision-making, design trends as well, which everyone kind of loves, what's in and what's not in, whether that's just from colours and soft furnishings right through to cold plunge pools versus saunas. And it's amazing to watch. It is a genuine trend that you see probably set by someone very cool who's setting it far, far, far away. But how clients and designers follow that trend, but it moves. Design moves so quickly, but that's very exciting.
That's very exciting.
Mm.
You are a lovely man. You're also seriously driven, and I'm been really impressed with your ambition and your sort of diligence and detail, and I know it's going somewhere.
Yeah, I would love to believe that we can take it internationally, and not just deliver projects internationally as we're doing now, but actually have physical presence with designers from all over the world in those local territories. If you really want to be able to deliver the same services we're delivering here, you've got to be on the boots on the ground and have people who really understand the landscape of delivering a project out there. Yeah, the index is already kind of covering how build costs in Dubai compared to London, to the south of France, to the States as points of reference. And we'll build on that over the coming years as we report on it. But yeah, the plan is to have all this information coming in.
Fun.
Yeah.
I mean, we find with those people that international buyers are much more familiar with buying off plan, and much more. They've just done it before.
Yeah.
Whereas in England, it's very second home. There's very few people in England. There haven't been as many new homes built, so people are very used to the sort of niches and the character, the old. And to be honest, some of this character is actually. I live in a 500-year-old house. Character / huge holes in the walls that I can't fill in because it's listed. And yeah, maybe they're just. I mean, I can imagine if you have an English client here and they're building a house in South France, they'll probably want to be there and on the scene and maybe.
I think it's in our nature as Brits that you're slightly more. You want to be slightly more interwoven into the detail, and as you say, maybe it is because
maybe we're just less trusting.
Probably, yeah.
I've been amazed seeing. So we often see one person's home, and we see their design, and we love it, and But I've started to see other pictures of other people's homes all over the world, and their home in London. I don't know. I always expected that the design and the way they were living in London would be exactly how they're living in New York and in Ibiza and in wherever else. And I've been amazed at how varied the designs and the feels, and that must be a really cool thing as a client, as the owner, but also for you guys to be like, we're doing this for you in Mayfair, and then this thing in Caribbean and this thing in Saudi.
People are kind of entrust to what we as British design might think will work well. There is that understanding. So we work with a large number of Middle Eastern families who will just say, I want it to look British, I don't want to take what I've got here in the Middle East and impose it in London. I want to obviously still retain my design style or aesthetic, but I want it to be British. And so I think that level of trusting, you guys understand what British looks like, help me, align with my vision, something so that fits in and makes me feel like, this is my British home as opposed to what I've got currently in the Middle East.
What an amazing world.
It is. We've got one client, we just finished a beautiful apartment in just off Hyde Park. He's got 5 homes around the world, and he's this unbelievably delightful, successful lawyer with his own law practice, and the design style that he wants in each one of those is totally different. And he's almost like going to a menu, and he's like, oh, that's why I'm going to kind of go for like a Japan-Nordic, and I'll be like Japan-Nordic, okay, and so kind of interrogating our interior designers as to, can you deliver Japan-Nordic?
Have you heard of this before?
And we were like, oh, God, Japan-Nordic. And, there's a real fusion of the wonderful minimalist Japanese design style, which kind of complements a very kind of Nordic aesthetic too. And you can blend them. And, so from beds on the ground, but it's very minimal. And then something pretty maximist, loads of color, you know, in his New York property, very cool. And it's just like, are they owned by the same person? But you could see, if you look into the detail, what's important to them and how they want to live. It's still there, but it's just a very different design.
We often when we go into the really high value properties that we handle, we talk a lot about them being like art pieces and sort of more one-off rather than cookie cutter. There are 10 houses like this on the street.
Sure.
And so he is genuinely using these for work and life and properly going around them. And they're like different art pieces. He's into his Nordic Japanese and into his maximalist.
Yeah.
I mean, I love art and I love the combination of all these different interesting things that kind of remind you of different times of life or different times with different people. You know, I'm not a person that has multiple properties or need to fly around the world regularly enough.
But what's your design aesthetic for your kind of home? Is it you and your wife, or you know, how have you blended, or have you not? Have you just?
I mean, I think I've moved 11 or 12 times in the last 15 years.
Wow.
And our job is terrible for that because we're constantly exposed to amazing different designs. And as you said, with the changing design trends, you know, we start to see Crystal. You know, Crystal wasn't around at all, and now Crystal's changed a bit. And, and then you see different colours, and you see people being more confident with colour and different materials. And our job is also transacting. So I get a thrill out of the transaction. I actually get a thrill out of buying and selling rather than actually
living.
like that part's really fun.
Yeah.
I think we've now slowed down with 3 kids. I think we need to give them some stability.
Do you think design in the country where you've moved to has a slower pace of development than it does in the city? You know, as you say, when you're moving around London and you develop, you know, you're growing up and you're so exposed to so many different design aesthetics and people, and you know, it's so multicultural that influences your decision making. And then you go to the country, there is definitely a more a steadier pace of design aesthetic, which complements, you know, nature. Is that something that you feel that is representative of you and your property?
I think the interesting thing that, and I've never thought about this at all, but and from your clients it might be something similar. I have such a huge portfolio in my mind of options for different architectures and spaces and rooms in London, because I've seen thousands of properties and I've seen how people reacted to them. I've seen the type of people to do things, like some of the people that we deal with that I've just loved and got on with them and found them inspiring. Sometimes when I see the things they do, that kind of, I think, oh yeah, I quite want to do that. But moving to the country, so we bought my wife's parents' home. I have never ever looked at another. I've been into pretty much 2 homes in the country in my whole life. So the one we grew up in when I was 10 till 20, and then this one.
Oh wow!
And they are complete. So I always imagined I'd moved to the country when I was 10, when my kids were 10, like I did, and I imagined I'd moved to a house that was similar to the one we grew up in. And we've moved a lot. Our eldest was 3 or 4 when we moved, a lot sooner than I did. And the home we've bought is so completely different. It's thatched. With your height, you would hit your head. I mean, I pretty much have to wear a scrum cap all the time anyway. But it's filled with character. It's unlike any. So it's listed, and it basically has no corridors. It's got 3 staircases.
Wow.
And I think it was 2 or 3 houses put together.
Okay.
And
it's a bit of a maze.
It's quite narrow. Okay. It's quite long. So there are no corridors to get through anywhere. So you go from the kitchen to the hallway, to the living room that we've converted into a playroom, to another room that we don't really use, and then to a study. And there are no corridors. So you have to go through each room.
Interrupting everyone as you go through.
And so we have a bedroom above my study, and that's the only staircase. So you have to go through all these rooms and past the study to get up to that bedroom.
So 3 kids constantly running through your study, and you're like, how can you do any work?
I mean, our kids' bedroom, one of our kids' bedrooms has two doors in it, and you have to go through their bedroom to get to our daughter's room. and she's been a newborn, so we've had to be going through to get her at bed.
Thankfully, he sleeps through it.
They do sleep through it, but and then the doorway's up to about my belly button. So in the middle of the night, I'm sort of carrying a kid out and taking for a pee in the middle of the night and banging her head. And
what made you buy the property? What was the kind of...
I'm not selling it, am I? So again, I think it's a bit like art, and and I think it's a bit like what we see a lot at work, and that's why I think we love the residential part of property. Is so much of the purchasing and the involvement we have is with the heart. Mm-hmm. Very little bits with the head.
Yeah.
And we have moved into the house that my wife. She's lived in the village since she was 6 months.
Oh wow! Okay.
She moved into this house when she was 10. We had our wedding at the church next door, and our party happened in the garden, way before we thought we'd move there. And so emotionally, it's just, and her parents now live next door, so our kids have this great relationship with them.
Right. Okay.
And we've tweaked it and upgraded it to suit us and to give it more of a feeling of us. Yeah, I love it. Love it. I don't know. It's not the house I thought I'd live in, but I love it, and it's
character.
It's got lots of character, and style-wise, we kind of ran out of money to do the interior design thing, and I'm kind of pleased we did, because as soon as we moved in, the beautiful walls that we'd painted, both of our boys were standing there with their welly boots on, and to get them off, they would flick their feet. So we've got welly boot mud patches on every wall. And then you've got kid hand marks all the way down.
Thank God you didn't put the Degornay wallpaper on there.
The Degornay will be when they're about 18. So I've said to my wife already, I reckon give it another 10, 15 years and we'll do proper redesign.
Yeah, great. By that time, it'll be gone. You can actually enjoy it. Great.
Sorry, that was a lot about me. But on the family side, I'm one of 6 kids. You're one of
5 brothers.
5 boys.
Yeah.
So might be a bit of a change from what we've been chatting about, but
yes,
not many other people have grown up with that kind of craziness.
No, I mean, aside from yourselves, you'll understand it. We're super close. They now live all over the world, from Barcelona to Costa Rica to Exmoor. Yeah, kind of growing up was an absolute madhouse down in Somerset. We still had the family home. Mum still lived down there. I think Mum would just like get outside, close the door, and then they would have forgotten. And it was just turn into an absolute scrum, mayhem outside, and come back, a few hours later, cut it bloody and bruised. But it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I loved it.
Awesome.
Loved it.
I mean, I've got 2 boys and then a girl, and our boys just, in the nicest way, they fight all the time. The sort of adrenaline and boys are so different from girls, or at least what I'm seeing with little kids. And I just can't imagine I can't imagine what we were like.
Would you go again?
You know this, but I'm very, very sensible, responsible person. And 3 was not sensible at all. I have planned and strategized everything in my life.
I know, you live by an Excel. I know.
Excel and diary organisation. He was laughing at me about that, which is great. And 2 was the sensible decision. 3 was a little bit of my wife's craziness. And she convinced me. She said to me, it's going to be a year of hell, sleep, crawling around, food everywhere. Yeah. I'm not a good one for mess or disorder. Sure. But after a year's gone, it's 30 years of joy. And I was like,
you sold it.
I was like,
she did a better job of selling that than you did of your own house.
Yeah. And it's definitely been the best thing. I'm so pleased we've had 3. She's now saying absolutely no to 4. And I'm kind of like, well, I've thrown caution to the wind once, so let's, why not?
Amazing.
It is definitely the best thing that's happened to me. It's sort of forced. I'm fascinated in learning and growing, and I get bored quite quickly if I'm not on challenging myself. Yeah. I sort of go from, I think I told you the other day, I go from like this stress scale of bored to overwhelmed, and I'm trying to find that sort of 7 to 8 where I'm like, I'm excited, but not overwhelmed.
If you find it, please let me know, because
it's tough. So I'm either I'm so, and I think the thing with the kids is most of my life is thinking about efficiencies.
That's very true. That's very true.
So I think I tried to be more efficient, and I tried to, I didn't want to say that it was going to that I was going to be able to do less. I was like, I want to do it all.
Yeah.
And that is a big problem I have.
Sure.
I want to do it all. I'm sure we're a lot of us similar.
Sure.
So I was looking at efficiencies and spreadsheets and diary and all of this stuff, and that helped me get better at some of those things. But really, it was taking a look in the mirror to understand who I wanted to be, and I think actually I've been a little bit more relaxed about not being able to do everything.
Did that come, later? When did the penny drop of trying to find that balance to be able to provide this kind of 7 to 8 scenario that you talk about? Like, when did that, is it in the more latter years, or have you been working towards that for a while?
I went away traveling about 6 years ago. And I think it was a subconscious thing of, I want to break out and do something different. But I think that was a subconscious way of me thinking, I need to be more aware and figure some of this stuff out. And I think then having a kid forced me to tackle it rather than let it go.
Sure.
And I started seeing a therapist about 3.5 years ago, who's this amazing guy who is qualified in therapy, but also coaching and sort of business coaching as well. Mm-hmm. And he and I together have worked a lot on developing skills of how to reflect, how to be more confident and happy myself. And yeah, it's been a pretty eye-opening experience, that.
I think it's a massive thing, that personal development. And I also recently started seeing a therapist. I lost one of my best friends tragically and very quickly just about a year ago. And it kind of drove me, a lot of people are doing therapy and kind of talking about it, and as a proud man, it's like, do I need to? And, coming from a testosterone fueled background, and it's like, not that it was never allowed to be open with our emotions by any means, but it just, I thought I could handle it. And I think losing my friend, one of my best friends, was the kind of driver to go and talk. And you soon realize that it's not just that you've got to get off your chest. It's like, once you start, and you just the offloading, which many times comes into work, and the obsessive nature that you put into it, and the stress and the drives of that, or family, relationships. But it's been the most wonderful thing, and I couldn't be a bigger advocate for it. And I think, anyone who is going through anything, which we all are the whole time, get something out of it that can be genuinely life changing in terms of how you develop and perceive life, and what you want from life.
Yeah. Have you noticed that that's had a positive impact on the person you are at work and how you manage situations?
Definitely, generally, relationships. Being able to commit, and as I said, not prioritize work, or just and that commitment to somebody else, and then that's meaning giving more time to life outside of work. And suddenly, the reality of does it need to be so intense the whole time? And the answer is no, it doesn't. You can still be great at what you do, and still have a passion, and still work as hard as one does. But there is this great other side that you just can lean into much more so, and not jeopardize all that you've worked for.
Yeah.
So I definitely believe it's had such a positive impact for me as a kind of character, which no doubt kind of comes into the office in terms of being able to deal with situations and just having more empathy and compassion for other people, myself, and the business as a whole, which has been great.
That's awesome. I mean, I think we got to know each other. You invited me for dinner. This was the first time we really got to know each other, and we've now, I hope you're okay with me talking about this, but there are now 4 of us who go out for dinner every quarter, and I've actually, since you've done that, I've initiated it with a few other people. I'm doing that with a few other friends, and the conversations we have there is, it kind of inspired me to do this, and it's It's been an amazing part of my life to be able to share so openly in such a trusted environment. It's quite scary bringing it onto camera,
Sure.
but great. And I think there's, we've grown up in a different generation where there's probably been less acceptance to be open about stuff. And I think the more open you can be about it, the more people then open up, and it's sort of, I don't know, I love the dinners we have, and
they're the best.
They're the best.
Truly, it's like people who are in exactly the same boat, in the sense of running their own business, similar ages, and dealing with their own pressures and own difficulties. And you can sometimes, when you're rowing your own boat, you're like, am I the only person in this great vast sea, feeling all of these different pressures? But when you offload and share and confide in someone, and then they do exactly the same, and you're like, and you're able to offer insight, perspective, comfort, whatever you want to support, it's amazing how it feeds, because it can be pretty, lonely running a business.
There's always so much to learn, and I think there's so much good perspective that other people can have on you that you can't see yourself.
I
our jobs are all encompassing. I mean, these are they're jobs, but they're also part of our life.
Yeah.
And I think being able to figure out who you are and be a better person, it's just all one.
Yeah.
It's not a job or a separate life. Like there's 7 or 8 that I'm trying to get to. It's never going to get there, but at least I'm aware that I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get there.
It is.
Well, I hugely respect what you're doing at work, and love everything outside of work as well. So thank you for your friendship and agreeing to come here.
Bertie, thank you for having me. Honestly, it's a wonderful thing to be able to talk about RedBook, but also to share that with yourself, and the friendship and admiration for what you and your family have created with Russell Simpson. It's a pleasure to be here, so thank you.
Thank you.